Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webcast on the future of employee engagement and retention. So good morning to those of you who are joining us from Europe, and good afternoon to those of you in the Asia Pacific region. So welcome to this webcast. This is part of a fantastic series that we've been running, informed by our future of work research. And this webcast series is looking at how amidst disruption, intense competition for talent, businesses are focusing on a much more personalised, employee-centric approach at every stage of the employee life cycle. And we've been bringing together some of our members here in Europe and in Asia Pacific, and also thought leaders and people from innovative startups. So it's been a fantastic mix in our panelists. So I'm Marion Devine. I'm a senior researcher here in the Conference Board in Europe, and I will be your moderator today. So just to go through some of our housekeeping rules and information about today's platform. So please, to participate today, do feel free to ask questions as they occur via the chat box at the bottom left of your screen. And I will do my best to weave them into the conversation. And if we can't answer them today, we will try and follow them up with email. And you can download the presentation. Please share it with your teams via the file download pod in the bottom center of the screen. You can have full screen at any time just by clicking the 4 arrows at the top right of the screen. And please do complete the brief evaluation. We really do want to know how we can keep on improving our programs and really meet your needs. So please do fill that in. And share this program with your colleagues. It will be available on demand after the webcast on our website, I believe within 24 hours. So for those of you who earn credits, you do have to stay online for the entire webcast. And for the 3 different credits, you just type in your full name, your email address, and specify whether it's HRCI or SHRM or CPE in the space provided. And then every time a pop-up comes up, just click OK, and then you'll be earning your credits. So moving on, I think that just to introduce today's webcast, there are lots of shiny new toys out there to help businesses really find out new approaches to employee engagement. And these are in the shape of cloud-based technologies, and these are also generating really rich pools of employee data. So in the area of employee engagement, leaders can really act on new insights from this data to enhance engagement for the benefit both of employees and workers, and also for the bottom line of the business. And there's a lot of evidence that engagement really does contribute to business performance. So there are new ways to explore and measure engagement. The technology also has the potential to become a lever for engagement too, if we get it right. And so I think the question today that I really want to explore with my panelists is, how do we move into this sort of technology-shaped future without leaving behind some of the human-based drivers of engagement, such as leadership and culture? And I know that our panelists today will really help us explore the future of employee engagement. So I'd like to welcome today Leon Chi-Tung, and he is the joint founder with his colleague Marie Lee, and he's the CEO of Engage Rocket. This is a HR startup that helps automate the employee experience insight across the life cycle of each employee. And something I think you'd like to probably to emphasize really for you is that Engage Rocket has been named among the 20 hottest startups in 2018 by the Singapore Business Review. So no pressure here. Welcome, Chi-Tung.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marion.
It's great to have you with us. My second guest is Annette Engelsgaard, and she's the Global Vice President of Employee Experience Engagement for Teleperformance. And this is a BPO organization that has grown phenomenally since it began 41 years ago. So on the one hand, Chi-Tung's startup started only, I think, in 2016. Annette's company has been going for 41 years, but it now has 300,000 employees in 80 countries, speaking 265 languages. But Annette, I would like to welcome you in one language today, English. Welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
And Annette is also a member of our European Council on Employee Engagement and Employee Experience. So it's great that she's representing the council there. My third guest is Sean Collins, and he's located in SAP SuccessFactors Centre of Excellence in the area of HR strategy. And he'll be sharing his insights garnered through his years of experience working with international businesses in the Asia Pacific region. So as you can see, we have a wonderfully sort of geographically very dispersed and diverse panelists today. So welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Marion. Great to be here with you and such an esteemed and expert panel. Should be a good discussion.
I hope so, definitely. So I think just to start off in our webcast, I'd really like each of you, in a nutshell, just to describe your current approach, your current take on employee engagement and employee experience. What's your strategy or what's your approach? Or what are the needs and challenges that you're responding to in your own context? Chi-Chang, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you shared, Marion, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Engage Rocket, and what we focus on is really to help companies to improve the employee experience using real-time analytics. And we do that by helping talent to belong, grow, and perform, so that we see engagement really across these three different areas. And we also focus on helping these talent to belong, grow, and perform across the entire life cycle that they spend with the company. And the vision is really to allow leaders in HR to use real-time data to make better people decisions and to personalize the employee experience to improve engagement and performance in a way that marketers and salespeople have already been deploying analytics to improve the customer experience. And by providing a continuous listening platform like this, we've actually found, and our customers report, that it's a quantum leap away from ad hoc or annual employee surveys, where the focus is really just on benchmarking and driving participation and mechanical action planning. And what I hope to cover today and to share a little bit of our experience around is that while many of our customers are based in Asia Pacific, we're actually across now 13 different markets, including the UK and the USA. And it's very, very interesting to see what's common across all these markets, what's unique in Asia versus other parts of the world, and across all the 25 different industries that we serve. And we'll be happy to share more later. But these are some of the major pain points around employee engagement, moving away from ad hoc, siloed employee experience receptacles or data streams, and kind of merging all of them together into a single source of truth.
Great. Now that sounds really, really interesting, Chi-Chang. And I think if we can use out some regional differences, but also commonalities, that would be fantastic. Annette, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what's happening for you at Teleperformance.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. So Teleperformance, as you mentioned, was founded in 1978, and we started with 10 employees. And now, 41 years later, we have 330,000 people in the group. And overall, we are a contact center business, so we're one of the largest in the world, if we're not the largest one. And we interact probably with more than half of the world's population in a year. So a full-time front employee will interact with end users, with customers across a year, maybe up to 6,000 different customers, okay? So what we're asking our people to do is to create an outstanding customer experience, okay? So our challenge is, of course, that speaking with customers, 6,000 different customers in a year is a really, really tough job. And customers are reaching out to us, not happy, they are reaching out because they have an issue, they have a challenge. So the job in itself is very stressful, it is very tough, and you don't last a long time. You can't perform well over more than maybe 2 or 3 years. So when we ask our people to create an outstanding customer experience, the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, we need to treat our people the way we ask them to treat the customers. So our people strategy is really kind of simple, because we say happy employees make happy customers and make happy clients at the end of the day. And happy clients will make a happy P&L. So our employees are our first and most important customer. This is our strategy in the group today.
Great, thank you, Annette. And I think that actually this theme of the link between customer engagement and employee engagement is really going to come out in our webcast today. So Sean, I'd love to hear from you about your perspective at SAP SuccessFactors.
Okay, thanks, Marion. So I think I really have two perspectives on employee engagement, and one is bound up in my professional experiences, which are, point of origin in workforce analytics, and then a more frequent and recent conversation, which is more and more so about employee experience. So let me talk about that. The first one, because there is a direct connection to employee engagement, and that's this notion of workforce analytics. So if we think about the types of organisations who have really invested in workforce analytics in the past, they tend to be, larger, maybe, or more complex organisations. But certainly, the third point would be organisations where their investment in people is more significant. So if we think about a bank, they might be spending something like 60+% of their annual operating budget on wages, salaries, benefits, and so on. So for organisations like those, or maybe retailers, they need to get employee engagement right, and they need to get analytics as an underlying foundation. So if we think about first and foremost what analytics tends to focus on, it's about trying to understand the workforce and its composition and how that changes over time. It's about trying to understand the efficiency and effectiveness of HR policies and initiatives, and this is where engagement really comes in. It's also about trying to understand how both people and HR come together to drive business impact. But I think in my work with many leading organisations who are really mature in this space, what they've always sought to do is to imbue this sort of operational and HR data with something like the voice of the employee, so engagement data. And traditionally that's been kind of difficult. Because the data is held by third-party service vendors, because of complexities around data integration and also concerns around data privacy and anonymity of responses. So I think there's been movement there, which no doubt we'll talk a little bit more about today. But that's maybe one perspective, and just to reinforce that qualitative voice of employee is critical in any analytics effort. I think my second perspective is more around this notion of employee experience. So that tends to be a term or the language that certainly is part of my conversations more recently with our customers. Yes, we hear about employee engagement and those notions of psychological, traits and behaviours and so on, and engagement being very much influenced by social networks and leadership within the organisation, particularly that manager relationship. But increasingly, it's my conversations around experience, which tend to be more like the journey the employee has from pre-hire through to exit, and trying to really understand how listening to employees can drive a better experience than maybe some of the more traditional approaches, and I'm prepared to be challenged on this, but the more traditional approaches around engagement where we look to finesse the work environment in the hope that employees will engage with our culture and values and company objectives. But it's a different conversation I'm seeing now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sean. So I think already we're hearing some of these, really key concepts around the voice of the employee, around employee experience, continuous sort of engagement with employees. So really, I think this will bring us quite nicely into sort of the first question I guess I have, which is, where are we today? Is the reality out there mostly that companies, when it comes to engagement, just think pretty much of a top-down annual engagement survey, or is are there some promising developments around today that companies are starting to use? So whoever would like to start, please, let's have a look at this.
I would love
Absolutely.
to start this.
Thanks. Annette, would you like to?
No. Go ahead, Chitung.
Just very quickly, from what we've seen in the market here in Asia Pacific and even in the United States and the United Kingdom, actually, when it comes to just companies as a whole, still a majority of them don't even do anything with regard to collecting data around employee engagement. So you have upward of 50% of companies that don't run any kind of surveys, at least even on a regular basis. You would see maybe another 35% of them who do run annual engagement surveys or engagement surveys that happen every 2 years, and a very small fraction, closer to 5 to 7%, that do run what we would term continuous listening, anything from a half-yearly or quarterly type survey to collect data from the employees. This is where the state of what we've seen state of the industry is so far. So there's a lot of room to grow, in our opinion.
Only 5 to 7%. That's really, to me, that's quite surprising. Only 5 to 7% are doing continuous listening. So Annette, you were going to say something here.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk about the employee experience and the way we measure it. So we have been measuring our employee experience, I would say rather satisfaction than experience for the last 10 years in an annual survey across the world. So every year we launch a survey. We invite all our employees to answer a long questionnaire. In the past, it was around 150 questions, and it was all about how satisfied are you with this chair, the lighting, the acoustic, how satisfied are you with the facilities, how satisfied are you with your career plans, etc., etc., your first line manager, the senior leadership, etc. And more than 10 years after that, and with a lot of data, a lot of understanding, but still not enough understanding, we this year did a major change. So we considered 2019 as a disruptive year in terms of employee experience. We changed the questionnaire completely and went into a rather experience-based way of asking questions. So instead of saying, how satisfied are you with, we ask questions, how do you see this subject? Or how do you experience your first line manager on different aspects of the entire life cycle? So this is the first step, going from an annual survey into something more that you talk about, the continuous listening. But we're still on the annual survey. So the first step for us was, okay, let's change the way we ask the questions from a satisfaction-oriented way to a more experience-oriented way. The next step will be to start asking the questions at the right time. So looking at the entire life cycle of an employee, from pre-hire to hire to first day in the company, to the training period, to the onboarding, to the nesting on the job training, etc., etc. So mapping out what are the real moments of truth in the employee life cycle, and saying, okay, what is it that we don't want them to experience, and what is it that we want them to experience? And once you define that, then looking at how do we then measure the experience. It could be an annual survey for some of the moments of truth, and it could be also pulse surveys at the right moment, so right after recruitment, right after training, right after nesting, etc., etc. And I think it's not only continuous listening, but we should aim at going into a continuous dialogue. So when we ask a question, we need to act on it, and we need to communicate back on the responses that we get. So a dialogue is kind of the next step for us. So first annual survey, then moments of truth surveys, and then from continuous listening into a continuous dialogue. But to do all that, we need technology, because we need technology to connect all these dots, making sure that we understand, that we truly listen, and that we communicate back, we act on it, and we can start to predict behaviors. So this is how we see the way we're moving from an annual survey to a continuous listening into a continuous dialogue, and technology for that is crucial.
Sean, does that resonate with you? What Annette is
saying? Look, let me react to that let me react to a couple of comments. Firstly, something you said a moment ago, Marion. You described employee engagement as a top-down approach, and I suppose that sort of, HR centricity to driving engagement and recruiting managers and leaders in that process, does suggest a top-down approach. And we heard Annette a moment ago talk about a more, perhaps organic or bottoms-up approach, which I think defines employee experience. So I think, that there is something in the way that you devise an instrument, whatever that may be, and we'll talk about that shortly, I'm sure, about the technology approach. But this sort of bottoms-up approach where employee experience is seeking to find out how can you as an employee do your best work and connect with our purpose. So that might be, seeking to find out how you can change processes and places and ways of working so that employees are more comfortable. So in a sense, if I was to really step back here a little bit and take a 30,000-foot view, I think there is a megatrend at play here that defines where employee engagement or experience is at right now, and that's this notion of the experience economy. So this is something that HR and the world of work is being drawn into, but really I think has its genesis in the customer world or the consumer world, if you like. And Chi-Tung, you mentioned introduction. I think it's something that we really need to be conscious of as HR professionals. So this notion of an experience economy where there's a value add that accrues to providing an experience. So not providing a service or a product which is a commodity or a good or a defined service, but something that's beyond that again. So we see it all around, whether it be boutique coffee shops or fancy barber shops or how you buy a car or whatever it might well be. This notion of an experience economy, and people are really tightly entwined in an experience economy. And we've heard Annette and Chi-Tung talk about the reasons for that, and that is, employees are integral to the transaction that adds value often. So I think that's a megatrend that we need to be conscious of in how we look at employee engagement today. I'll stop for a minute.
Yeah, I think that really chimes with some research that we've done into talent mobility, particularly internal mobility, and the fact that it's we saw in our research that the employee experience is really important, especially for millennials, that when they approach a relocation, they're thinking about the experience, and that HR has to work in different ways to personalise it and tailor it. So, I can really see how that chimes. Chi-Tung, what do you feel about all this? And Annette is very much saying that yes, the top-down annual engagement survey, but they are recasting it, focusing on experience, moments of truth, going into continuous listening, but continuous dialogue. And Sean talking about this whole experience economy and connecting with purpose. Does this resonate with you from what you're seeing in your own work?
Very much so. I think underlying all of this is a core insight that if you just split the kind of data that we collect on our people into like operational data on one hand and then experience data on the other hand, we find that the operational data tends to be lagging indicators, indicators like and the talent retention, cost per hire, productivity, and so on. And why there's this sudden shift towards an interest in the experience metrics or the experience economy, as Sean said, is that the experience data and Sean are collecting actually help to be leading indicators of the operational data. And we find that to be true on the customer side. And this, I think marketers and business development people have known this for decades. And when we look internally within the firm and within the company, we find that this is equally true when it comes to looking at talent attrition and performance. I'll give you an example. Facebook actually published this in the Harvard Business Review. Something as simple as employees that don't participate in their quarterly or biannual surveys are actually 2.6 times more likely to leave the company as compared to somebody that has participated. And when we looked into our own data as well, we found actually very similar trends. within our customer base, we're looking at 2.7 to 2.8 times increased likelihood of leaving within 6 months if they don't participate in the survey. So what we I think as an industry are trying to figure out, to be able to sit with others in the C-suite as a strategic partner. The people operations team, the HR teams need to be able to forecast into the future the impact of policies, plans, changes today on the people and the business tomorrow. So this is where I think the biggest dividends in the experience economy would lie, especially for people operations and HR teams.
Any comment there, Sean?
Yeah, Chitong's stealing all my ideas. No, just kidding. Look, really good points there, but I think, you know, what organisations are finding out as they seek to pollinate, X data with O data, so experience data and operational data, is that there's a gap. So for the very reasons that Chitong has mentioned. So I think, for many organisations who've been able to get on top of, descriptive and even prescriptive analytics and move into the predictive space, but leveraging only operational data. So, your classic HR metrics, time to fill or offer acceptance rate or promotion speeds and that sort of thing. You're missing something that's really critical, which is really this experience piece. So what we see in some of the research some of the research I've read is that organisations tend to vastly overestimate the types of experiences that they provide to their customers and also to their employees. So, I think one study I read said something like, 80% of CEOs felt that they gave their customers, an adequate or a high, a really good experience, when in fact customers' sentiment was as often as low as 8%. So there's this enormous gap, and that's caused by not really joining these two data sets together. So I think that's sort of kind of critical. Maybe moving on to just why we're able to do this now and perhaps haven't been able to in the past. So I think, you mentioned in your intro, Marion, about the emergence of cloud technology and so on. And I think, there really has been a technology.
I think, Sean, if I can just sort of say, we'll put the technology just aside for 1 minute, and I will move on to the technology. But before you do that, I just want to look back to Annette. So Annette, both Chitong and Sean are talking about this importance of predictive analytics of leading indicators, and the fact that companies overestimate their experiences that they're providing. So does this chime with what you said a few minutes ago about moments of truth, about moving from continuous listening to continuous dialogue, and the fact that you want to, as a business, start thinking about predicting behaviour? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the first thing I would like to comment on, both Chitong and Sean, is we work with a third provider measuring our employee experience. Okay. Currently, it's an annual survey, and we're going into the continuous listening, and then further down the road, the continuous dialogue. At the same time, we use the same company to measure our client satisfaction. So not the customer, but the client satisfaction, so those we work on behalf of. And we see a direct correlation between our employee engagement measures and results and the client satisfaction. So depending on the years, the correlation is not perfect, but it's somewhere between 0.72 and 0.78 in correlation. So we know that happy employees, engaged employees, make also happy clients. Okay, so that's the first thing. And I think it is really, really crucial that when you measure employee engagement, you need to look at not only the employee engagement, but make the correlation to the other outcome that you want, which is the what is right for the business. So your clients, your customers, and make that correlation continuously in the same way as you do on an annual basis. If you go into continuous listening, continuous dialogue, you need to do that correlation continuously. And we see definitely that when you focus on the employee experience and you go into the moments of truth, each of these phases, you will see a direct impact on the bottom line. So that's really, really important for everyone to understand that there is, so let me say it in a different way. If you go for, let's say you want to have a certification, a great place to work certification, for instance, you can go and you can hunt that every single year. Or you want to have happy clients, you can try to hunt for happy clients. But if you do the right things internally, if you really take care of your people throughout those moments of truth and you know exactly what you want them to experience, the outcome will be there. You will have it. It will directly impact the bottom line at the end of the day.
Great, thank you, Annette. Any comments, Sean and Judong?
No,
well, it's very encouraging to hear what Annette has described. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think to sort of hear that passion, I think it's easy to it's hard to show that actually when you talk to executives and leaders who are really thoughtful about employee engagement, just the passion that they have. And the fact that they really can see there's a very clear line of sight between engagement and, as you say, Annette, what's happening with your customers and everything. Sean, you mentioned as well connecting with purpose. And that's something actually in our European Engagement Council that Annette was at just recently. The theme of purpose, connecting with purpose, engagement with purpose really came up. So can you sort of say a little bit more about that, Sean?
Well, I mean, I think, gosh, where do I start? I mean, I think, that the world of work is changing. There's unprecedented speed with which organisations are asked to respond to change, and I think that people respond to that rate of change in either two ways. They see it as a threat or they see it as an opportunity. We kind of know that for a lot of organisations in the 21st century, the two big engines of innovation and growth are technology and people. So I think, going back to the threat or opportunity piece, people face this uncertainty, and maybe one of the ways that they want to be able to be certain that their work has value and meaning is that it gives them a sense of purpose, that they can see some sort of an alignment that directly connects their everyday efforts to where the company's heading, so they can see that they're a part of a whole. But I think it's even more than that, where the boundaries between work and personal life are fluid. You give more of yourself to the world of work. So I'm sure for all of us on this panel and many people in the world of work, it doesn't stop when you leave the office. It goes on, perhaps well into the evening and early mornings. So it's a trade-off. There's a compromise there between the way that we used to think about work being 9 to 5 and 5 days a week and the world we find ourselves in today. So it's got to have meaning, because the trade-offs are often in your personal. In fact, you start to hear a lot of, maybe younger people are adopting a mentality that we might have only seen in really highly motivated entrepreneurs or leaders in the past, where they almost see no difference between work-life balance. It's just life. And for that to work for people and stay committed, there needs to be that purpose and drive.
Yeah. And I think you can connect with this thing of home life and work, because I think you have a concept in your company of home from home. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we have a concept we call home away from home. Absolutely. So just coming back to our business, as a full-time agent, you speak with maybe 4,000 or 6,000 different customers in a year. And you spend a lot of time in the company. People are getting connected more and more with the employer. Our people are connecting at work, but they're also connecting before they come and after they leave the office through social networks, etc., etc. It's all about connectivity. It's all about collaboration across the world, and things are moving so fast. So what we realize, just to come back to what Sean said before, is that we have our employees, our frontline employees, maybe for a period of 2 years, and we need to create this outstanding employee experience throughout their employee life cycle, which is really, really short. We don't have agents maybe for 10 years. So we need to be really, really fast. So to drive that and to make sure that our people really understand that we so care about them, we know that they are our first customers, our most important customer, we manage the whole business with a very strong culture, people culture, and a purpose, a common purpose. That's critical for us to have that common purpose. And what we try to tell our people, because we are 330,000 people around the world, is that we make a better world because we create an outstanding customer experience. So we are changing the world. This is the message we give. This is the purpose we give to our people. And we drive that through our values and our DNA. Now, having said that, we also know that the job is tough. People spend a lot of time at work. They are connected with the employer many hours before and after the work, as I mentioned before. So we have this concept of home away from home. So we want people to feel that they are part of a family, that when they come to work, or even before they come to work, they are at home. So we work a lot on safety, of course, but health in particular, educating our people to make healthy decisions at work, but also before and after work. And we look at work-life balance, and we look at the overall concept of well-being, making sure that all these things are connected, all the dots are connected to these moments of truth that we want to measure in the continuous dialogue. So home away from home is a very strong concept that we work and we manage by.
Okay, great, thank you, Annette. So at this point, I think it would be really good to turn to the role now, the increasingly important role that analytics, technology, and of course, technology is generating so much of this data, and companies have methods and tools to really drill down. So, Jidong, what you're hearing from Annette, she's talking about very, very human-based needs here, well-being, and also I think that Sean, talking about purpose. How does this fit in then, from your mind, in terms of how we make sure that analytics and technology is really helping these human-based sort of interactions and processes?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and completely resonate with what Sean and Annette are saying. I think where technology and analytics really shine in supporting some of the people decisions that are made around this are in two different areas. So one is the ability to track and monitor exactly what kind of impact different policies, management strategies, different management communication is having in the workforce. The kind of changes that companies are going through today. I'll give you an example. A study from Professor Foster at Yale University showed that in the average lifespan of a company on the S&P 500 back in the 1920s was 67 years. But today, that has dropped to 15 years. And with that pace of change, companies really need to step up and quadruple the frequency at which they are able to process market data as well as internal data. So technology and analytics combined can help to support that increased pace of business. The second thing that is really important with all these different human elements in play within an organization, Annette made this point earlier about making this correlation between customer and employee data continuously. Now, being able to do this manually is going to be extremely difficult to do. So having technology do what it does best, which is high levels of automated processing, to be able to surface key priorities and intelligent actions that management can take as a means of decision support, can really help to pair out, for example, what is going to make the biggest difference on employee retention, if that is a strategic objective for our business over the next 6 months. Should it be increased communication around our value and purpose, or is it really just about providing free lunches at work? We need some data to be able to make sense of that kind of decision. And today, without that data, it's pretty much whoever is the better salesperson at the boardroom to be able to drive that agenda. And we'd like very much to support a world in which this kind of decision is made using data.
Mm-hmm. And Sean, I held you back, but would you like to speak now a little bit more about your sense of the opportunities with technology and data?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the world of technology is changing, incredibly at the moment. Certainly has in the last few years, and that's only accelerating. And bearing in mind something Yi-Tung talked about earlier when he talked about the proportion of organisations that are really leading in this continuous listening. It's kind of similar in a sense in the technology game. There's the world of what's possible today is incredible, but there's a lot of organisations that need to sort of kind of come up to speed, if you like. But what I'm seeing is the rise of the intelligent enterprise, and that's what I would call an intelligent enterprise is an organisation that's leveraging all of the latest innovations. So things like being able to use and apply artificial intelligence, be it in bots or some other capacity, machine learning, predictive analytics, and so on, and really bring that to bear on how you use and design technology. So I know certainly, as a vendor, SAP SuccessFactors, we're embedding those kind of capabilities into our HR software, and that changes the experience not only for HR professionals, because it means that the technology is not just about automating processes, it's about understanding what drives people. Mm-hmm. So employees, are kind of who are using our technology, and I'll call it operational technology for the moment, but HR systems and so on. It really appeals to their motivations. So we're talking about technology that builds goals for them or goal plans and aligns to corporate strategy and maybe recommends where their next career step might be, or what other people who have had their tenure and in their job family are doing for learning that's making them a high performer. So that kind of smarts is available today, and I think the next evolution for us is building into this people-oriented technology, this digital open door. So continuous listening, we kind of use this term digital open door, but this ongoing listening, which could be everything from an annual survey to very small pulse surveys which are event-driven. So, for example, you're a new hire and there's a pulse check on day one that sort of says, have you met your manager and your mentor or your buddy? Maybe it's punched out again on day 7 just to check in on how you're going, and getting these episodic senses of your journey within the organisation. Or maybe you've been on maternity leave and you come back to work, and you can kind of automatically do all of this because we're connecting operational and experience data together here. But really checking in on people, so this continuous listening to get a better and more comprehensive sense of their journey, and their sense of place in that journey.
Annette, and I'll ask Ji-Chung in a minute as well. Annette, how do you respond to what Sean said about the rise of the intelligent enterprise? And I guess my question is what sort of intelligence is this? Is this sort of very conceptual, cognitive intelligence? Does it also include emotional intelligence? And what does that mean, say, for you as a head of engagement in a global company?
So when it comes to technology and artificial intelligence, first of all, I think a lot of businesses around the world are quite worried about artificial intelligence and what does it mean for our people. Are we going to decrease the number of headcounts that we have, etc.? And I think, at least for us, it's the complete opposite. We embrace artificial intelligence because it's a great opportunity actually using artificial intelligence to create an outstanding, for us, customer experience, but first and foremost, employee experience. So using the technology in the right way. If you look at an interaction, there are 2 parts of an interaction between 2 people. There is a rational part, and then there is the emotional part, the emotional component. And we can let robots and bots and whatever technology is out there manage the rational part. But when it comes to building trust, building loyalty, and this is our job, we need people. People need people. There's no way we can just eliminate people. So what we see as an opportunity is really expanding everything and being able to increase the amount of emotional intelligence that we do. So letting our people do what they're best at, interacting with people, and let the artificial intelligence, let the technology handle the rational parts. That's fine with us. So for us, it's a great opportunity to create a much better employee experience, which in itself will impact the customer experience. So we embrace it. And we call this in Teleperformance, we call it high tech, high touch. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for us and all our people.
I think high tech, high touch is a wonderful slogan. Jitong, what's your reaction to what Sean and Annette have been saying? How do you understand the rise of the intelligent enterprise?
I love what they're saying, and especially love the high tech, high touch slogan. I think this is very much the way that enterprises and actually just to generalize, humans would go, where being able to work together with intelligent suggestions from machines and computers will eventually lead to better outcomes for everyone. I think there is a little bit of a reality check that I would like to throw into the mix here with regard to the intelligent enterprise. I think while computing power and the rise of machine learning and artificial intelligence, natural language processing is following a crazy pace. The processing power that we have at our fingertips today is exponentially more than it was before. There's some humility that we need to have. Just looking at the volume of that data being processed in terms of if you think of data processing having an input, that there's processing and an output in terms of how intelligence can be generated, the input has increased tremendously. Just in the past 2 years, 2017 and 2018, more data has been generated globally than the previous 5,000 years of human history. If we think about that, it is actually quite mind-boggling. But at the same time, when it comes to how much of that data is actually organized for analysis, it is less than 0.5%. So there's an enormous potential that remains being able to sort and process 99.5% of the data that's being collected in a meaningful way. So for the intelligent enterprise to really really take off, I think we're doing towards more predictive and prescriptive analysis, and that unfortunately
I think, Sean, you're breaking up at the moment, so I think our technical people will try to improve the link with you. But I think what I'm hearing is really sort of positive things from our panelists, saying that technology, data, there's an enormous potential out there, and there's enormous potential to make organisations more intelligent, but not just rationally intelligent, but also emotionally intelligent. So sort of looking at the future, looking at, say, the next 5 years, Sean and Annette, what do you see as the sort of, what next on the horizon? What will employee engagement look like in a very technology-based, connected, and really quite a fluid workplace? What's your predictions? Annette, would you like to go first?
Let me make a.
Oh, Sean, thank you.
Let me make a start, maybe. So look, I think just to pick up for a moment on some of the comments or the conversation we've just had about the impact of innovative technology. That we know that that's going to have a significant impact on the types of tasks that people perform in the workplace today, and maybe within the next 10 years we'll see 60% of those tasks being automated by machines or bots or what have you. And I think, one trend is that leads to much higher order or higher value work that people need to deliver. It's using more of what's up here and not as much of what's sort of in the muscles maybe. if we really want to simplify it down. But it's more around, what we can bring of our minds, but also our emotions and how we connect and collaborate with colleagues and interact with customers. So I think, that actually drives us back to maybe where we originally came from when we started to talk about, employee engagement. It's about that social connection and that notion of purpose we talked about earlier, and having a network of friends at work and a good relationship with your manager. So I think, that's maybe something to be conscious of, and maybe it's actually a reason why, for example, we've seen the emergences of continuous performance management as a methodology or a modality within the HR and management domain. It's that notion that in a world of work where people need to give more of themselves, you need to have that continuous conversation with your leader in order to be sure that your work remains at an effective high level. So I think that's something about where we're heading in the world of work. Maybe I'll pause for a minute and let Annette contribute.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think what we see is today mapping out the organizations in terms of emotional intelligence. So looking at your workforce and looking at all the different functions and tasks that need to be done in the workplace and saying, we need to combine IQ with EQ. So once you do that, you start mapping out, these are the functions, these are the tasks, these are the roles we have in the organization, and you can't always look at a high IQ or a high EQ, but have a combination of it. Some tasks need more emotional intelligence than others. Where can you replace the human part with technology, as you say? But at the end of the day, I think, because Marion, your question was where are we going with technology? I don't know what technology we will have in 10 years. I have no clue. What I do know is that people will always be people. And I think we need to constantly remember, don't forget those small things that really matter. Nothing can replace a face-to-face contact in the employee life cycle. We are not dealing with robots here, we're dealing with people. So we need to look at the rational part of the interactions. We need to look at where technology can enhance the employee experience so that they thrive. But people will always be people. So not forget that human touch, that face-to-face contact. And yes, you can do pulse surveys. Yes, you can do annual surveys or biannual surveys or whatever it is in the continuous dialogue. But you can also just go and ask an employee, how are you doing today? Yeah. That's also important. So we should never, I strongly believe we should never forget that part of it. It's all about people at the end of the day.
Chi-Tang, are you back with us now? Yeah, good. What about you? I mean, have you got any sense of where we're going, what the technology, where it will lead us? Or will we go almost back to some of our traditional origins of employee engagement?
Yeah, I think the future will really help employee engagement, or technology will really help employee engagement in 3 different ways in the coming future. The first is being able to connect employee engagement much better with business metrics, and to do that intelligently and predictively. This is particularly important in markets like Asia Pacific, where the cost of labor is actually a lot lower, and some businesses actually have staff costs as a percentage of OPEX as low as 30%. So in some property developers, for example, they have staff costs are much lower than in banking. Mentioned. So so the buy-in for leaders to see how employee engagement changes business metrics, I think is something that will make a big difference to. There's something that will make a big difference to improving the adoption of employee engagement practices within regions like Asia Pacific. The second big trend that we're going to see is we've always talked about employee engagement being part and parcel of management or people management capabilities. This is going to become more and more important as staff and junior staff are going to be experts at completely different roles than their bosses, that their bosses had to tackle years ago. So McKinsey predicts that 65% of students today will actually be in jobs that don't even exist yet. So instead of a world, an industrial revolution 2.0 world where your boss has done your job many, many years before you have, we're going to be in a world where your boss actually is clueless about what you do. And their biggest value add as a boss is being able to motivate you and keep you aligned with what the company's vision is. Yeah. And the third big trend that I see within employee engagement is extending it to the new shape of the workforce. When we look at the gig economy, it doesn't feel as real until we talk to some of the recruiters that are on the ground. And they've shared that in markets like Singapore, for example, the ratio and the shift between contract recruiting and permanent staff recruiting has entirely flipped within just a 2 or 3 year time frame. So just 2 years ago, about 80% of the recruitment market was still focused on permanent positions, and 20% were contract positions. Whereas very recently, this has flipped entirely to 20% permanent recruiting and 80% contract recruiting. So when we extend the workforce to include contract employees or gig workers, how do we engage them as well? Because they now comprise a much larger proportion of our workforce. How do we keep them engaged? What are their needs, and how do they see their contributions to the firm? So I think just very quickly, those are the three big things that I think would be the next steps in engagement.
Great, thank you. Well, we're getting towards the end of our webcast now. There is one question from our viewers, and that is have you got any insights on how gaming platforms can make a difference in employee engagement? Has anyone got a quick answer to that?
I can, from experience in teleperformance, well, absolutely, gaming is a must moving forward, and typically it's something that you can use in terms of learning and development. So gamification is, I think, a must in the future. We will use gamification. We are using gamification for people to learn quicker, because again, we're back to the rapidity. Everything moves so fast. And people want to be connected and they want to collaborate. So gamification is awesome for that perspective, from the first day to the exit even. So yeah, gamification is really good, and it's there, and people will be expecting it from employers, making sure that you stay connected, and having fun is also really, really critical for employee engagement. We talk about culture, we talk about purpose, and we talk about well-being and health, and we haven't even mentioned the word fun. So yes, gamification is really needed.
Great. Well, on our last minute now, I need to wrap up this webcast, and we could keep talking, I know, but so I think that we're seeing from this webcast that engagement is really moving very fast from what was a traditional top-down, very annual engagement survey approach to one that's much more interactive, much more thoughtful, which is incorporating data and new technology. But at the same time, our conversation has very much gone back to, and there is the human. Let's not lose the human in all of this. But huge potential still untapped, lots of technology still emerging. So to my panel, to each one of you, what would be your key kind of piece of advice to organizations out there who really want to move into this new future of this very technology-based, connected workplace? Sean, would you like to give your quick take on it? And then we will have to end with the webcast.
Well, I think, really my guidance wouldn't really be about the technology which is available and will help you do the job better. But ultimately, I think just listen to your employees, understand what they're saying, and then act on it. That's how you get employee engagement or employee experience right.
Great. Annette?
I completely agree. You know, you can measure a lot of things. You can measure from day one to the end of the employee life cycle of a person. But really what you need to remember is you need the organization and all your managers to have the capacity and the capability to manage this data. So be careful with what you measure. And back to Sean, what you were saying is really it's about the connection between the people and the human interaction as well. So be prudent.
Great. And Chitang?
Technology is a really good servant, but a terrible master. So I would say that for companies and leaders to be very clear about what exactly you want technology to do for you before deploying it. So don't put the cart before the horse and digitalize for the sake of it. Really be clear about what exactly it is that you want technology to do for your people, what kind of impact you want it to have, and then deploy the right kind of technologies to support that.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank my three panelists. Thank you so much for your time, for your insights. It's been really interesting seeing, your thoughts from quite different contexts and different types of organizations. So I think we have to wrap up now. That does conclude today's webcast. I hope that everybody watching has enjoyed it, but if you would kindly take the time to do the evaluation, we really do find that very, very useful. And let me also remind you that the recording of this webcast will be available on our website within 24 hours. So thank you very much for joining me today, and goodbye to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.